I don't know all of you. My name's Joe, and I teach a class on storytelling. And this was partly the reason I think that the Story Slams have come into existence. Dr. Josh Armstrong was here. Where's Josh? Someplace. There he is. Pushed me on this idea of this program out in New York called the Moth Project, which is a great storytelling project, and that kind of led me to really think more about this. And Caitlin Bodlow, who's here, and then Lindsay Watchwell, who I'll introduce just momentarily, have been really organizers of this thing. So my job is to talk for about a minute and then get out of the way, so I will do that. But just really quickly, some framework. Well, the Story Slam is really intended to offer people a forum to share a story, and mainly a self-narrative. It's not just a story, a fictional account. It is a self-narrative of some sort, an identity-related story. So in February, and actually in November too, we had stories related to something narrative, authenticity, different themes related to that. And tonight the theme is Carpe Diem and seizing the day, you know. And so we've invited a few different storytellers here to share stories related to their take on Carpe Diem. And that's really the boundaries we create for people. So each of the storytellers will be introduced by Lindsay in just a second. They'll come up, share their story. The time frame, you'll hear it, just so you're warned. Nolan has the gong back there, actually. Somebody called it a bong today. Is everybody saying a bong? Everybody's like, what? Anyway, it's actually a South Korean gong. My son got me when he lived there. Brought it back. So at the 15-minute mark, you'll hear that, and that's the signal for the storyteller to conclude. So stories tend to be in the 8 to 12-minute range, right in there, and Lindsay will do a little brief interlude between each storyteller and then introduce the next one. And then at the very end, if you have some time, if you'd like to ask any questions of our storytellers tonight. This is very courageous to get up here and do this. If you've never done it, it scares the crap out of you. Because in a sense, it's a very vulnerable thing and risky kind of endeavor to undertake. So we really appreciate your support, encouragement, and just be really good listeners as these folks share their Carpe Diem tales. So with that, Lindsay Watchwell, who's really been the organizer of Story Slam and broadcast major, is that right? Someday having her own TV show. This is kind of her transition into that, I think. So without further ado, Lindsay, go ahead.
I swear Joe gives me like way more credit than deserved. It's really, and this is a blessing to do. I've had so much fun doing this. With that being said though, before anything, I really want to thank all the storytellers who are coming out here tonight. We've had a lot of mixed tips and lots of no I can't do, no I'm scared. Again, like Joe said, it's a really powerful thing and a really tough thing to get up here, but also listeners, you're going to have just the same amount of amazing experience. I tell you, I've been in the class, it's one of the most amazing things. With that being said, again, we've had lots of like, can't do it, won't do it, I'm gonna do it. Our first storyteller actually was just told about an hour and a half ago, maybe less time, that she was gonna be up here tonight. Casey Schaub, she's a senior, great girl if you don't know her, political science major and international studies from Yakima, Washington. Fun fact about her though is since she's from Washington, she hasn't actually been to the top of the Space Needle, but she's managed to get up to the Empire State Building as well as the Eiffel Tower, which kind of leads nicely into her story. So take it away, Casey.
Can I sit? This might be a hazard, actually. Can I not sit on this? Okay, that would be better. Sorry. Okay. So, my day begins on September 6th, 2009, when I was actually standing in the Seattle-Tacoma International Airport at gate S10 with a one-way ticket to Italy clutched between my trembling fingers. And there were so many reasons on that day that I really should not have gotten on that airplane, or so many reasons that I could have not gotten on that airplane, and beginning with the fact that I was choosing to leave a life graced with the modern comforts of elevators, ramps, and curb cuts, and go into a lifestyle that was much more ancient with cobblestones and stairs and numerous narrow streets and things like that. I was leaving behind family and friends who intimately understood my disability, and deciding to trust complete strangers who had no knowledge of what cerebral palsy was. I was deciding to leave behind my family, who we had become a family of 3, 6 years earlier when my brother passed away from cancer, and so I was choosing to leave behind all of those things. And in that moment of having that ticket, I knew that they couldn't protect me anymore, and my face became the color of a well-aged glass of Chianti, and my eyes welled with tears the size of the Atlantic Ocean that I was about to cross, and I really was studying abroad. And for anyone else, I think the decision to study abroad is really easy, maybe, but for me it was something that really was a year in the making, and felt at moments more ancient than the city of Florence itself, really. Because it began in my sophomore year when I went into the study abroad office, and the lady said, "How can I help you?" And I said, "I want to study abroad, I want to go to Florence." And she looked at me like I wasn't speaking English, really. Even though the words that I said were complete English, I felt in a second there that we needed a translating dictionary, just because of the fact that I had a disability. I think kind of scared her, but in that moment I was determined to make the idea of a disability and studying abroad not a contradiction of terms anymore. And so with that, I next approached my parents, and I knew this was going to be a much more difficult venture than the study abroad office. And their rules for me being able to go study abroad was they wanted to actually see where I was going to go live. So we actually booked a trip to Florence to fly more than 5,000 miles so they could actually see what this place that I wanted to go to was going to look like for me. And to have that support of my parents was really great. And at the end of that trip, we decided that this really was what I needed to do for me to learn that independence. And so the next few months after deciding that I was going to study abroad, I made my deposit and the tickets were purchased, and the next few months were basically elements of advice from my parents that came, which were actually really interesting. The first came from my dad when we were having a seemingly what I thought was an ordinary conversation, and he all of a sudden looks at me and says, "Casey, promise me this. Please don't come back married." And I knew immediately that he was making a reference to my favorite childhood movie of Father the Bride. So I promised him that I wasn't going to go to Italy and find my own Brian McKenzie and surprise him when I came back. So the next one was actually much more interesting because I came home for Easter that year, and knowing that we were going to go have me study abroad, my dad said, "Oh, do you want to go for a movie?" And I said, "Okay, sure." It's a pretty normal occurrence in my family, but he seemed like out of the ordinary excited about what we were about to go do, and I thought that was weird, but I decided to go with him anyway. And so we're sitting in the theater, and I didn't know what we were going to go see, and all of a sudden the movie starts, and we were seeing Taken. I don't know. Apparently, everyone knows. If you don't know, it's a movie with Liam Neeson, and his daughter gets abducted while she's in Paris, while she's studying there for the summer. And in this moment, I knew that my dad and I had completely different notions of what studying abroad was. And at the end of the movie, we're sitting there, and he looks at me, he's like, "Casey, wasn't that great?" And I'm like, "Actually, no." But then the greatest part was when he looks at me and he goes, "Okay, well, I'm going to program my phone number into your phone, so if you're ever under your bed, hiding from your abductors, that you can call me right away and I'll go get you." But the ironic thing is that he actually took my phone away at the airport so that I couldn't take it to Florence with me. So, like, if that actually did happen, thank goodness it didn't. But if it did, I didn't know how I was really going to deal with that. But, I mean, so on that fateful day, I actually did get on that plane and go. And, like, in the beginning, it was really difficult because I had all of these expectations of these places that I wanted to see and all these things that I wanted to do. And it really wasn't holding up to what I thought studying abroad was going to be, because I couldn't be as spontaneous as my friends. I was watching everybody else go gallivant around Europe, and I, because of my need to secure previous accommodations and things like that, like I couldn't as easily go and do all of those things. So I was pretty down and out about it a few of the times that I was over there, actually, until there was one day that I actually literally fell in the road, and I thought no one saw it, and I was like, oh great, I'm just gonna get up, like it's gonna be fine, brush yourself off or whatever. But this guy, who's an Italian, all of a sudden all I see is this outstretched hand of this man that I have no idea who he is, but he was actually riding his Vespa, and he stopped his Vespa in the middle of the road, left it running, and came over to make sure that I was okay. And in that moment, I started to look at my experience in Italy really differently, and it made me have a special place in my heart forever for Italy. And so I started to see my experiences with a complete stranger, this woman who one day it was pouring rain in Italy, and I was getting soaked because I can't carry an umbrella and walk at the same time. It's kind of a horrible predicament. But she walked completely in the wrong direction, like out of her way so that I wouldn't get soaked from the storm. There was this woman that drove me up to the campground where I was staying on a trip so that I didn't have to like wait for the bus while it was like storming. And even my conversation partner, who met me at a central location where I lived just so that I didn't have to go really far from the city, and all of these accommodating things made me realize that it didn't matter the geographic location of where I lived or what language I spoke or anything like that. Like the real thing for me that I gained from that experience when I decided to get on that plane that day was the fact that I can be okay in my own skin with my disability. It doesn't matter where I live or where I am or anything like that. And so they graced me with the greatest lesson I could ever hope to learn in my independence in that way. And I mean, that fateful day when I decided to get on that plane, I emerged coming home with a round trip ticket containing the independence that I always wanted. So.
Come on in, intermission. Thank you again to Casey again. It was super last notice, but I mean, her story shouldn't go untold, so thanks again. Our next storyteller is actually a great story in itself, just because the reason why I really am getting involved in doing this is because not only are we doing Story Slam kind of through CLP and off of the class Storytelling and Leadership, but I wanted to get this project a lot bigger. And by doing Story Slams, I think it really invites people who aren't in CLP and are just kind of in different programs around campus and getting them involved. And Rob Muniz actually came up to me and messaged me right after the first Story Slam saying like, whoa, this was like so cool, this was the best experience I've ever had, and just talking to me about the community. And oh my gosh, my heart just sank hearing everything he said about it, because it was exactly what I wanted everyone to get out from this experience. So he really wanted to tell a story. He's a junior here studying mechanical engineering, and he has a great summer for him planned. He's going to be working with United Launch in Denver, and he's responsible for designing the Atlas V, Delta IV, and number 2 rockets, which are used to carry different things into space like satellites. So I don't know what that means because I'm just a broadcaster.
Thanks, Lindsay. So a little bit of background about myself just before I get into my story. Freshman and sophomore year of high school, I was basically failing out. I wasn't really into the whole academics thing. I had C's and D's in most of my classes, and I had already taken a couple remedial classes like algebra. Who would have thought a mechanical engineering major would be interested in math after that? So yeah, I'll just get to it. My story starts with me sitting in my advisor's room, and I've got the undergraduate course catalog on the left, the mechanical engineering degree, pre and co-requisite map on the right, and then Dr. C sitting right in front of me. And I look at him, and we talk for a while. We're kind of going back and forth, and he finally asks me the question. He says, all right, so what's it going to be? How are you going to do it? And at that moment, two men popped into my head, specifically two interactions that I had with them, and they were my grandfathers, the people that I'm named after. And tonight I'd like to share with you those two stories and why they're significant to me. So the first one took place in 7th grade. I was coming back from school, driving back with my mom, and I was going to get dropped off at my grandpa's house, Grandpa Allen. And we get to the house. She had called him on the phone. He didn't pick up. And so I walk up to the door, ring the doorbell. He doesn't answer. And so we wait for a little bit, and then I ring it again. Still doesn't answer. And I see my mom's face go from, just regular old mom to just paste white, just nothing. So she runs over to the car, grabs the garage door opener, opens it up, and inside the garage you have a van, you have the wood shop station, and then you have the door right in front of you. And that leads you into the rest of the house. And so she turns around to me and she says, Rob, come in after me or don't come in at all. And I said, all right, that's fine. So she opens up the door, and inside the door, I'm looking straight into my grandpa's room. And as she opens up the door, I can see this massive sheets just laying right next to his bed. And as soon as that door opens, I just smell this waft of piss and shit. It was absolutely disgusting. And as the door closes, I see his head pop up from those sheets, and he looks me straight in the eye. And at that point, I was pissed. I was really angry. And the reason being, our family had offered to, he's an individual with multiple sclerosis. And for that reason, he had lost all functionality from the waist down. He was unable to get up, and when he fell out of bed, he basically laid there for 3 days. And we had offered, literally a week before, to pay for a caregiver. And he said, oh, no way. Nobody's going to be wiping my ass kind of thing. And that stuck with me. That was something that was really, really important. The next interaction that I had was with my Grandpa Robert. We kind of had different ways of, different relationships altogether with my two grandfathers. My Grandpa Robert, he happened to live in Los Altos, California. And I only got to see him about once a year because I'm from Washington. So I flew down December, same year actually, and got to the house, this big hacienda style house, 2 stories, beautiful villa. And he built it himself from the ground up. He worked really hard on it. He designed everything in it from the plumbing to the electrical systems. So I open up the door, typical meet and greet, you give your grandparents a hug and kisses and then tell stories. And I remember him walking outside to go do some gardening. About a half hour later, comes back inside, I'm sitting on the couch. He goes, hey Rob, I want you to help me with something. And I go, yeah, sure, absolutely, Grandpa. So I walk outside, and outside you've got the apricot tree, the lemon tree, and then the pasture right in front of you. And he says, so Rob, what do you weigh now? And I go, oh, about 95 pounds, Grandpa. I'm getting up there. And he goes, oh, that's something. You're really just getting bigger every year. And I go, yeah, I put on about 5 pounds. And he goes, well, so I need someone strapping and strong such as yourself to help me out with this whole project. And I go, well, what's that? And he says, well, so ever since Honey died, the pasture's been open. And Honey was his horse, just big golden stallion, just beautiful horse. But she passed away that year. And so he goes, ever since Honey died, the pasture's been open, and I'd like to turn it into a vegetable garden. And I go, oh, but how are you going to do that? The ground's really hard, it's really packed in. And he goes, well, I was going to plow it. And I go, well, how are you going to do that? Honey's dead. I mean, you don't have a horse. He goes, well, come check it out. He had hooked up 2 ropes to the plow. And he said, yeah, give it a try. So I get into the plow. I've got this like jury-rigged rope harness on my back, and I put a foot down. And I give it everything. I mean, I just put all 95 pounds into it. And it budges about a foot. And I'm gassed. I have nothing left. And I turn around to him and I'm like, Grandpa, there's no way. I mean, I can't do this. And he looks at me like I had just told him I wasn't his grandson anymore. I mean, just killing me. So I walk back inside. I'm feeling like crap, sitting on the couch. And I'm just thinking to myself, I gotta be able to do this. Like, how can I make this happen? And so I sit there for like a good half hour, just really mulling it over. And finally, I get the courage to come back out there. I open up the glass sliding door. I walk out, and there's 5 lanes done, just finished. And I was astonished. I had no idea how it happened. And so I walk up to him, and I go, Grandpa, what happened? You know, who did this? And he goes, I did. And I said, how? How is this even possible? Now, mind you, he's bigger than me, but he was about 140 pounds, 5'8", you know, not the biggest dude in the gym. And he goes, yeah, I did it. And I said, but how did you do it? He goes, well, you see, first I got into the plow, put on the harness, and I pulled it. And then I got around it, and I adjusted it. And then I got back into the harness, and I pulled it. I got back around, and I adjusted it again. And he did this for 5 lanes, probably 15 yards up and down. And I was just blown away. And that also really stuck with me. And so going back to me sitting in the office, deciding whether or not I'm going to change my major, you know, an academic failure in high school, kind of worked my way up to getting into college, and then really trying to make something of myself, figuring out what I wanted to do. But mechanical engineering, like, it's a different world. It's, you know, you're gonna work your ass off if you end up picking this. And at that moment, when Dr. C asked me whether or not I was going to do it, I said absolutely. And the reason being, I learned 2 lessons from these men. I learned from my grandpa Alan that if you are willing to accept a helping hand when you need it the most, then you will avoid some of your life's greatest problems. You will be able to just bypass them altogether. And the second one is sometimes you have to be willing to be both the horse and the guy behind the plow. Meaning that you have to be willing to put in effort, but you have to be also willing to make the adjustments during that period when you are putting in the effort to accomplish whatever goals you have. And so I said, absolutely, let's make it happen, let's do it. And so here I am, 2.5 years later. That's it. That's right.
All right, so next we have one of our great seniors who's been working really hard with CLP this year. I happen to know at one point she was kind of running it, but you might not want to tell Josh that. Also, we've kind of been making this storytelling and leadership thing. We turned it not only into the class, but we also made interns, and she kind of ran the other half of storytelling and leadership, which was working with Lewis and Clark High School. And right now she's doing some great work, and I know she's getting tons of great reviews and tons of grant money for our project that we've just started this semester, and it's going to continue to be something really great. She's going to tell a story tonight about her trip to Zambia, which is through the CLP program, but not about how she got her nickname Trashling.
Not nearly as bad as it sounds. Or maybe it was after me. So, I've been in Africa about 2 weeks. I've experienced many things, from eating caterpillars to cutting the head off a chicken to plucking it to then cooking it. I'd met more friends than I can count. Children that would scream my name as I walked down the street. It was probably the only time in life I will ever be more popular than Stephen Gray. But it wasn't until Monday of National African Freedom Day, I think it was, that really everything hit me. I had off school, I was working on a teaching project, and we taught grades 7, and it had been a good experience, but we had the day off because of the holiday, and I had the opportunity to go with the nurses on one of their home care visits. And I came to learn that to be qualified for home care, you have to have AIDS, but a lot of these people also have some other illnesses and things that they're dealing with. And I remember the first visit, we all got in the car and the truck, and a lot of people piled in the back. And we got to the first house, and we met a lady who, I can't remember her name. I just remember that her brother was there, and he was really upset about the fact that the medicine was expired. And we had been to some hospitals, and to me, I was like, really, you're complaining? Like, you compared to some people, like, it's great that she's getting TB medicine. And so I just remember, like, being surprised, but not feeling it probably the way I should when I met a lady like this. And then we all got back into the truck, and we went and met another lady, and this lady was like 80 years old, and in Africa, that's pretty old. And while she had AIDS, she was just happy that we were there, that us white people, the Chindelis, decided to come visit her, and she showed us her card that, like, validated her citizenship, and she just smiled on her face the entire time. So kind of a contradiction from the first one. But again, like, I mean, not even been a year, and I can't even remember her name. But then we got in the truck, and although we got stuck on the way to the next house, because Father D is a little bit of a crazy driver, we finally made it to the third one. And the third lady, her name was Ethel. And I will never forget Ethel for my entire life. We pulled up in the truck, and Ethel wasn't there, but her brother and a bunch of his friends were out, and they were very intoxicated. And so Father Dominic kind of shooed them away, and out from the field came Ethel. And Ethel's 26 years old, about my height, but weighs about 80 pounds. And you could see the agony in every single step that she took. And she came in, she was working in the field, not to get food for herself, but to get food for everybody in her family. And so Father Dominic starts talking to her, and she didn't speak any English, but he translated that she'd just been really sick. Her legs, like, her skin almost looked like scales from where she had TB, and it would, like, swell and then shrink and then swell up again. And it was just impactful, but at the same time, like, I think Ethel would be just another face that I saw in Africa until we learned that Ethel's son came walking up the drive, who just had ran to the market, and Ethel's son her son's name was Roy, and Roy could have been just any other kid, but he wasn't. He was that face that I saw in class for the past 2 weeks. He was that kid that came to class every day with a smile on his face and that willingness to just want to absorb anything that we could give him. And I didn't know what Roy was going through every day, to watch his mother seriously on the end of her life. And I think back now to Ethel and the courage and the strength that that woman had when everything she was going through would have just told you to give up. And I think back to Roy, this 12-year-old little boy who had so much going against him, but he still made it to school every day, and he still helped take care of his mom. And I really think that, like, Ethel and Roy taught me the biggest lesson that I probably will ever learn in my life. And that was really that, like, when you meet somebody, you need to seize the opportunity to hear their story or to experience their story with them.
Next we have Gabe, and he's going to share his story about blindness. I'm sure a lot of you guys may have seen him around campus and wondered about that story. I know it's been one I've been wondering for quite some time, and it's probably a beautiful story. And throughout this last semester, I've actually gotten to know Gabe personally, and every time I talk to him, I just leave with my heart like open and a huge smile on my face because I don't know anyone frankly more inspirational. So without further ado, yeah, I'm gonna turn it on. I'm doing a documentary on him, so don't mind. Dress it down.
Sure. Why not?
And then there's a for another, not my documentary, but someone else's. You're fine.
Okay.
Just don't move.
Alright. Sounds good. Alright. 12 minutes. I want you guys to mark this time in your mind and close your eyes as I take you through my day. Alright. So I raise my arm up to chest level and feel the coolness of the glass as I push the door open. I feel the ridges under my feet as I'm walking out of my dorm. I feel Oregon's familiar tug, and I feel his shoulders rocking back and forth in my wrist. And now I'm heading down the incline of the Galler Hog parking lot as I go to class. And I'm thinking about my day and like what I have to do, kind of, and just thinking about how I'm so grateful for Oregon, my guide dog, and just how much of a blessing he is. And I'm reminded of the fact that I didn't always have Oregon. I wasn't even, sorry. I wasn't actually blind for like most of my life. And you guys can open your eyes now. And I really don't like telling this story to people before I get to know them, because my story is not who I am. Like, it speaks to my character or whatever you want to say, but like, I don't like being defined by my story, because then people start like making me into something that I'm not. And like, yes, it is inspirational, but I don't know. I just don't. I like to get to know a person and them to get to know me before I kind of let them know like my past. But so it all started on a fateful trip back from Dallas, Texas to my hometown, Tempe, Arizona. I was in Texas for a college visit with my sister, and cause my sister at the time was a senior, and so she was going to visit college. But so to precede this, I had been drinking a lot of water and kind of going to the bathroom a lot, and we didn't really know what was wrong, because I was a normal, healthy kid, and whatever, I was born quote unquote normal, whatever you want to call that. And so like I was on this trip, and I was kind of I wasn't feeling very good, and so I remember like my dad carrying me into the back of the car because I wasn't able to like walk get into the car. And I remember saying goodbye to my sister through the window, because I wasn't strong enough to get up and give her a hug. And so I passed out in the back of the car, and in the middle of nowhere, Texas, like 100 miles outside of the nearest hospital, my sister tried to wake me up, and I was non-responsive. So I pretty much, I wasn't waking up, and so my father sped to the nearest hospital, and on the way there, I stopped breathing, and my sister gave me CPR and got me breathing again. But so I got checked into the ER, and the nurses, seeing that I was panting, like because I was breathing, but very shallow and very like often. And so I was kind of panting or whatever, and so they gave me a drug to slow down my heart rate, but it slowed it down to where I was flatlined. And so I was dead or flatlined on the table for a long time, and the nurses had pretty much given up on me. One of the nurses actually prayed to God and asked them to give me my life, and she convinced them to give me one last shock, and on that last shock I was my heart started beating again. And far from out of the woods, I was diagnosed with having diabetes. This hospital that I've been checked into deals with 4 of these cases a month, and so they knew like really how to treat me, and which was really good. But also they knew like the normal outcomes of them, of what happens. And my case was a very severe case. And so they told my parents that pretty much I was going to be a vegetable. I was going to be living on life support and pretty much not have any brain functionality at all. So, as you can tell, I'm not in a hospital bed or on life support. And so I spent 2.5 weeks in the El Paso hospital, and all of which I do not remember because I was in a medically induced coma. But I was somehow miraculously stable enough to fly back to Phoenix, and there I was checked into the ICU. And I guess I remember waking up, and I was in the sunroom, they called it, and I remember waking up and only being able to see out of my left eye, maybe like a fourth of my vision or so. And I just remember being blinded by the sunlight, and just being like, wait, why? Like, what happened? And being a normal kid, or not normal, healthy kid before, like, I was like, oh, well, like, I guess something happened, but I guess I'll be out in a couple weeks, right? And obviously not obviously, but that didn't end up happening. I spent a total of like 4 months in the hospital recovering from the diabetic coma, but then also learning how to do everything again as a blind person. I remember sitting in the hospital bed, kind of just crying for like for days, and not really knowing what I was gonna do, because I remember walking down the hallway and being so disoriented because I was so dizzy, and I relied on vision for like all my life, and what was I gonna do without it? So obviously I was very depressed, or I don't know, but one thing that I found to be very true was that when you're at the bottom, there's only one way to look, and that's up. And for me, that saying holds very, very true. And so I got out of the hospital as the same person, with the same memories, with the same personality, which to me I believe is a total and complete miracle, because like the doctors were saying that I was going to be pretty much on life support. But so I did that, and I finished through school. I finished my freshman year, because this happened, to give you some perspective, this happened like 6 years ago, or I guess no, I just had my 5th year anniversary. So I finished through high school, or my freshman year, and then 6 months later, in the second semester of my sophomore year, I broke my leg, which was another setback, to say the least. But for me, I never really saw like being blind as an obstacle. It was like in the beginning, it was okay, I need to get out of the hospital, or like I need to make it through this day, because in the hospital there's so many negative things going around, like whether you end up like throwing up for 3 hours straight, or like whether you end up like not being able to like do some like easy tasks that you could do before. So you really have to learn how to cling to the good, and like, so whether it be like, oh, I got to take a shower today, awesome, or like, oh, I got like one IV bag pulled or something, and that really has carried out in my life, I guess, and I've really tried to, I guess, cling to the good, but really I've done nothing special. I don't feel like I've just faced one obstacle as the next, as it came to me, because first it was the hospital, then next it was like, okay, how do I figure out school? And so I had a lot of support through the couple foundations and stuff, but I really don't feel like I was doing anything special. And so with this leg break, I was like, okay, well, I'll figure it out, I guess. So I spent second semester of sophomore year and all of junior year in a wheelchair due to various complications with my diabetes and stuff. But so, like, I made it through junior year, and I ended up getting a hip replacement in July between my junior and senior year. And so that was just like another thing I needed to overcome. So it was like, oh, well, like, okay, I can finally be mobile, and I can finally be like up and walking around. I don't have to be in a wheelchair. I don't have to be a blind and a cripple. Now I can work on just like finding out what it means to be blind, I guess. And so naturally, not being satisfied, I was like, I'm gonna shoot for a dog. So I did, and obviously because Oregon's here with me. So I trained to get a guide dog, and in June between senior year and freshman year, senior year of high school and freshman of college, within a year of getting a hip replacement, I received Oregon, and that's really been like life-changing for me. I cannot describe you the feeling of first walking with Oregon. It is complete and utter like freedom, because one thing that I didn't like about the cane was that people are so like wary to approach you, or like so, oh, you're blind, like, oh, do you need help knowing where you're going or something, like, or I know they don't say it all the time or whatever, and like I'm sure I would have thought the same thing, but like with Oregon, like not only am I able to get places by myself or whatever, but like it helps me meet people, I guess. And I guess that was another reason why I really wanted to get Oregon. But so I got Oregon, and so I kind of came up here, and I really Gonzaga was a good fresh starting place for me, because in high school I was the kid that like went through this crazy stuff and like was able to do like awesome things or whatever, but I didn't really have like any friends, and so that's really kind of why like I don't like telling people my story, because
Cute.
12
minutes.
So
No, she's fine.
no,
50.
no, I know. So yeah. So that time since I've started, was how long I was flatlined for. So it was 12 minutes, and I looked it up, and a person's brain is dead after 10 minutes of no oxygen, and so I just, yeah. So I came up here, and I really didn't want to be known by my story, because I feel like so many other people have different stories, and like, sure, I've overcome whatever, but like, that's not who I am, and my story just happens to end in me being blind. And I feel like there's a lot of other people who have scars or like have other things that went through just as traumatic like life experience, but they don't have this stigma that like makes them different or whatever. So I really didn't want to see myself as like anything else, and so I didn't want other people to see myself as anything different. Yeah, and so I guess I've come here and done well and majored in computer science. And I guess I want to like leave you guys with like one story, just to show that I'm kind of normal. Okay, so I'm in my 8 a.m. class, which is terrible for microcomputing and architecture and assembly language. As you can imagine, it's kind of boring and rough to stay awake, really. So like, you know, I'm kind of tired, and so like I set my arm on the desk, and like I'm just like, okay, I'm gonna like rest my head for a little bit or whatever. And next thing I know, like people are like I hear people walking out, or like brushing up, and like they have a jacket, they're getting the jackets on and stuff, and like I was like, wait, what happened? Oh crap. And I guess I ended up snoring, which is super embarrassing. The professor didn't really know what to do, so he just kept on teaching. But so I got locked out of the class, and like, you know, I'm in College Hall, and so I'm on the 3rd floor, and so like I like walk down the carpet and go down to the elevator, push the down button, like walking through the doors, and kind of trying to like find where the 1 floor button is, and it was kind of hard. And so I gotta push it or whatever, and I get out on the 1st floor, and I'm just walking down, and I end up outside, and now I guess I want you guys to close your eyes. So I'm out in front of College Hall by the Magnuson Theater door, if that helps. And so I'm walking to where, like, I know where DeSmet Circle is, and so like, you know, I'm walking, I'm pretty sure of myself, like I know where I am in general. So like I take a couple turns, and like, you know, I'm walking on the concrete, so I know everything's good. But then all of a sudden I hit grass, and I don't know where I'm at. Like I could be facing Crosby, like, and because I kind of hear some students talking over there, or like I could be facing DeSmet, or maybe I'm even facing Goddard, but I just don't know. And so like I just kind of stand there for a little bit, and luckily like one of my friends is like, "Hey Gabe, what's up?" And I don't really know who it is, but I'm like, "Hey, what's up?" Well, like, where am I? It's like, dude, you're just right by the Smith Circle, and like, you're good, like, you know where you are, right? I was like, But, and so like, you know, he helps me out and like leads me up to like the incline of Gawler, and so like, I walk in and like I go back into my room and like I'm good, and so like you can open your eyes now. And so with that, like, I guess I just want to share like a couple of things that I've really learned with my story and everything is that like, this really ties into the Carpe Diem, but I really live my life by the saying that each day is a new day, and you don't have to let the past define who you will become, because I feel like a lot of people get stuck in their past, and like a lot of people are dwelling in like, oh, I should have done this, or I could have done this, and like, just like, oh, I really regret that, or whatever. But like, each day is a new day. Like, it's never happened before, and that's how I have to like live my life. Because yes, I might get lost on campus or whatever, but I still have to do that again. And so like, really, you just have to, I don't know, Carpe Diem. And I guess, like, yeah, that's what I would say.
To settle out the last of the night, we have one final storyteller, Megan Arabian. She's a senior, let's see, studying sociology and minoring in communications. She's from north of San Francisco, because like it's really touchy how to put the north in. She's been to 3 different continents. She's been to Zambia. She's been to El Salvador as well as Florence, kind of doing it all there. And more importantly, though, this summer she's going to be director of Camp Doodle.
So before I start reading my story, I kind of want to set the scene in a familiar spot. We all know Starbucks out on the corner of our campus. And if you go right across the street, right across Hamilton, you've got Jack and Dan's. And if you had known me last semester, the year before, or for the past many years, Carpe Diem for me was really, you know, let's go out, like let's get wasted, let's have a good time, live in the moment, not remember tonight, you know. And that was Carpe Diem for me. But today it looks a lot different. And standing on the corner, on that Starbucks corner, looking across the street at Jack and Dan's, a year ago, it was easy to cross the street. But today, crossing that street is basically making a choice between life or death. So with that, I'm going to start my story. Since September 3rd, 2005, I thought my relationship with alcohol was just like any of my peers. That fateful Friday night, I was hospitalized with alcohol poisoning for the first time. My friend Laura was hospitalized the weekend before, and my friend Jeannie was the weekend after. I did not think I was much different than my peers. Since that Friday, over 5 years ago, I had a negative, continuing, and reoccurring pattern with alcohol consumption. I had blacked out on multiple occasions. Some mornings, I had woken up not remembering much, but realizing I had done something horrible that not only hurt myself, but the people I loved. I would learn my lesson and tell myself to not drink as much. As time went by, I would continue to drink, not being able to control my intake. I would justify my drinking by believing I had learned my lesson. And every 4 or so months, a bad incident would occur, and I would wake up the next morning right back at square one. For a long time, I had felt that I lived dual lives that were mutually exclusive with no overlap. On one side of my life, I am an involved community member. I have always prioritized opportunities in which I get to build relationships with others, work with children, and serve my greater community. I have a loving family and come from a great neighborhood. I'm a motivated, team-oriented, creative, and enthusiastic individual. On the other side of my life, I am an alcoholic. I'd love to go out and have fun with my friends at parties in the bars. It's not just the partying that made my life so different than the other, but it was my past drinking habits that could one day turn fatal if not stopped. The person I was when I was drunk is not the person I am when I am sober. Since I was 15, a freshman in high school, I had been drinking alcohol. When I drank in a social party setting, 8 out of 10 times, I drank beyond control and blacked out. I had been hospitalized 3 times for alcohol poisoning and had puked my guts out till 5 in the afternoon after a night of heavy drinking on more occasions than I can count or remember. I'd seen an alcohol counselor, talked with mentors and my parents about my issues, and been to an AA meeting, but for some reason I continued to repeat my patterns over and over and over again. I constantly criticized myself and asked, when was I going to learn my lesson? The excuse of it is college or everyone has their bad nights no longer cut it for me anymore. The last time I had repeated my pattern with alcohol was during the first week of this spring semester. During this first week, I drank heavily 9 days in a row. One evening, I drank and drove, and another night, I broke a window with my foot in my apartment, that is Gonzaga owned. My drinking was out of control, and I knew my body was different. On January 20th of this year, I was called in for an immediate meeting with the director of off-campus housing. Going into this meeting, I was terrified, thinking of every possible scenario except for the one that actually occurred. I knew the meeting was in regards to the broken window, and I thought, this is it, I'm getting kicked out of GU. In reality, I was being called in for an intervention. The director was concerned not only about the window incident, but was concerned about incidences he had heard through the grapevine from staff and students. He was not there to get me in trouble, but was genuinely worried about my health and safety in regards to alcohol. Shortly after meeting with him, I was outsourced to an alcohol and drug treatment center for testing. I met the criteria for alcohol abusive and alcohol dependent. After receiving the results, I started treatment. In addition to everything on my plate, and unbeknown to many, I've been attending weekly one-on-one meetings with my alcohol counselor, initial weekly group meetings with other addicts, a few AA meetings, and bi-weekly meetings with a life counselor. An alcoholic. It is a hard pill to swallow, but everything added up. A social drinker does not hang out at a party wondering where they will get their next drink and thinking if they have a problem. When I think alcoholic, I thought of a male bum on the street. But my alcohol counselor told me that only 3% of alcoholics are those you see on the streets, and only 15% are those that wake up every morning needing a drink to start their day. These are classified as physically addicted alcoholics, but the other 80% or so of alcoholics are people just like me, people that can go about their usual routines. The difference between social drinkers and us is our genetic makeup makes us predisposed to alcoholism. My predisposition comes from both sides of my family. On my dad's side, my uncle died 8 years ago from major organ failure as a result of alcoholism, and my cousin is currently in and out of rehab. On my mom's side, my great-grandfather also died from major organ failure as a result of alcoholism. Having 3 alcoholic family members makes me 500% more likely to be an alcoholic. Today, I have been sober for 85 days. It has not been a walk in the park. A high intake of alcohol stunts one's emotional growth, and every time I had heavily drank, I had hindered that growth. Since I stopped abusing alcohol, I have been on one hell of an emotional roller coaster. My body is constantly looking for an emotional and chemical balance without alcohol. The first month was extremely hard as I constantly craved drinks, my mood was in continuous swings, and I experienced several nightmares. Nightmares where I wake up in a sweat thinking that I had drank alcohol and feeling guilty. Although it has been difficult, I have had great support from Gonzaga administration, my parents, my treatment, and my friends over the past couple of months. And I've even had support from complete strangers. I've had several overwhelming breakdowns. One occurred on a Monday we had school off in late February. I was sitting in Starbucks, dreading a conversation I was about to have with an ex-coworker from camp last year named Captain Fun, who my boss was looking to rehire. I was not pleased about the situation. After a short conversation with him, I hung up feeling frustrated, run down, and pissed. I walked outside of Starbucks, was crying, and immediately called my dad. I discussed how I was overwhelmed not only about the phone call with Captain Fun, but with everything on my plate. By the end of the conversation, I wanted to do what I do best: escape the problems and walk across the street to Jack and Dan's and get a drink or 2 or 5. I hung up and was so close to walking over. I was salivating as I looked at the bar. It was right there in front of me. Tears rolling down my eyes, I heard someone calling for my attention behind me. I turned around and a woman, late 30s with blonde hair, was sitting in a tan Ford Explorer asking if I was going inside Starbucks. I said yes. And she said, "I know it's not my place, but I cannot help but overhear your conversation. Please let me buy you a coffee. I will not accept no for an answer." She graciously held $5 outside her window. I said, "No, it's okay." She was consistent in holding her arm out and insisted I treat myself to something in Starbucks. I accepted the money and walked inside. I started packing up my things, and the man next to me, who was tutoring his son in math, said, "Say a prayer. I hope everything works out." As I bought a coffee, my tears were not of anger, but of thankfulness. I knew these simple acts of kindness were from the grace of God. God was working through them. I saw them as signs to not drink. I walked home, looked at the closest AA meeting, and attended. After the meeting, I went to the student chapel for the first time and prayed. This was the first time I ever truly prayed. In the student chapel, I found peace and quiet, where I was able to completely let go. I asked God to relieve me of my burdens and expectations I brought upon myself, and I realized I could no longer do this journey alone. Earlier I discussed how I lived dual lives, the life of an alcoholic and the life of an involved community member. I believed they were mutually exclusive, but in actuality, I learned through my one-on-one meeting with my alcohol counselor that they were completely intertwined. I've been able to be so involved and not get overwhelmed through my release of excessive drinking. For over 5 years, I have used alcohol to temporarily forget my responsibilities and escape the present. Over the years, I've thought, if I can just write this paper, go to this meeting, go to one more class, meet with, etc., I can get fucked up this weekend, go crazy, and not worry about all of this. Now that I have eliminated alcohol, I'm learning to juggle all my responsibilities without my only coping mechanism of alcohol. I often think and sometimes get asked, well, if you're an alcoholic, then every college binge drinking student is an alcoholic. Some college drinkers will graduate and never down a fifth in one night again. Some will graduate and their college drinking will translate to alcoholism. But I cannot compare myself to my friends or other drinkers, because I only know what is right for me. I know that when I drink, I become somebody who is the opposite of who I want to be and am. While under the influence, I become selfish, immature, irrational, closed-minded, insecure, etc. None of these feelings are positive, and none of these words describe who I am. I experience this false sense of self. Next year, after Camp Doodles, I plan on taking a year off. I will simply be Megan Arabian, with no other titles. I will be learning to be okay with me, not using responsibilities to define who I am, and not using alcohol to manage tasks I may have. Will I ever drink again? I cannot answer that. All I know is I will not be drinking today.
It up for this evening. Again, I want to thank all my storytellers. We really can't put on this event without you guys. You really make it. So thank you again, Gabe, Casey, Ashley, Rob, and Megan. Okay. And again, we're planning on doing these starting the fall again, I think kind of 2 each semester. So if this is something you guys liked and you're interested in, please talk to either myself or Joe, because we'd love to have you guys be up here as well as listening. So thank you very much.